I'll be happy.
Hey guys, I just wanted to get on and talk to you about the news that went down yesterday about the church purchasing all of those properties and, of course, the Kirtland Temple. This is so exciting. I want to talk about it just a little bit. So yesterday was my birthday, so it was a crazy busy day. Lots of people reaching out to me, plans with my family, running errands all day long. It was a big day because it was the primary elections. My son is old enough now to vote this year, so my husband wanted me to invite him to be a part of that so we could do it together. It was going to be something that we were going to do on my birthday. And then I realized that caucus night is a meeting you have to go to in person. It was from 6 to 8 p.m. and that was right during our dinner reservation, so I knew we weren't going to be able to make it. I was pretty bummed and I couldn't find any information about any of the candidates, and then I realized that's because that's something they want to tell you about at the meeting. They inform you on all the issues, all the candidates, and then everybody votes. And I guess you can still participate if you're not there, but by the time we found that out, it was too late. So anyways, it was a big day. Everybody was talking about the primaries. Every time I looked at social media or the radio, that's all people were talking about. And then all of a sudden, at some point during the day when I was out running errands, I get this text message from my husband in which he said, "Hey, the church just purchased the Kirtland Temple." And I knew what that meant. Here is that breaking news from the church newsroom. They wrote, "The following is a joint statement from Community of Christ and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Today, Tuesday, March 5th, 2024, the responsibility and ownership for the Kirtland Temple, several historic buildings in Nauvoo, and various manuscripts and artifacts officially transferred from Community of Christ to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for an agreed-upon amount. Together, we share an interest in and reverence for these historic sites and items and are committed to preserving them for future generations. Discussions leading to this landmark agreement commenced in June of 2021. This exchange of assets is significant for our church," said Stephen M. Viazzi, president of Community of Christ. Through funding from increased endowments, Community of Christ will have greater capacity to pursue our mission priorities around the world, including continuing to fulfill the divinely envisioned purposes for our temple in Independence, Missouri. We are deeply honored to assume the stewardship of these sacred places, documents, and artifacts," said Russell M. Nelson, president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. "We thank our friends at Community of Christ for their great care and cooperation in preserving these historical treasures thus far. We are committed to doing the same. The Kirtland Temple will remain a historic building. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints plans to reopen it March 25th, 2024 for public tours at no charge. Likewise, in Nauvoo, the Smith family homestead, the Mansion House, and the Red Brick Store will also reopen on March 25th. For year-round public tours at no charge. More details about the transaction, assets, and other items included in the agreement will be forthcoming." This is so exciting. These historic buildings represent the most sacred origins of our church and will now be able to tell those stories as visitors come from all over the world to tour these buildings and these sites. As church historian Glenn Rawson put it, he said, "Jesus Christ himself appeared. Ancient prophets appeared. Those sites where heaven and earth came together for us continue to be sacred ground." I wondered why they chose Tuesday, March 5th to make this announcement, as it was election day. It was also my birthday, so this felt like an awesome birthday present, even though it had nothing to do with me personally. I was so excited, and let me just tell you, I think a lot of us sort of knew that this was in the works for a while, because I remember back in either, it was 2018 or 2019, I took a trip to Missouri when I used to be a part of that Building Bridges organization. And while I was there, I stayed with a family. It was a husband and wife who were a part of one of the breakoffs of the original church. And I know there's close to 400 different breakoffs. It's crazy. So I can't remember the name of their particular breakoff, but I remember them telling me that the Community of Christ Church, also known as the RLDS Church, that they were in serious financial trouble and that they were needing to possibly file for bankruptcy, or they had already filed for bankruptcy, something along those lines, that they were in serious financial distress and they were looking for ways to come out of that. And so there had been talk of them selling all of those properties and selling all of these precious historical items and properties to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I remember when I heard about this back then while I was on that trip, I thought that was pretty incredible and it made sense. And I just thought, it's amazing how everything works in the Lord's timing. It's amazing how He sets things up so everything falls into place. And I also remember for years feeling a little bit sad that the church didn't own all of those special, important, sacred, historic properties and artifacts. But I had this feeling that someday they would. And so I remember when I was staying with this family and they told me that that was already happening, I knew it was just a matter of time. And then I have a friend who shared with me that around the time of the last general conference, there was a leader who came out and visited her area and told one of the leaders in her area that that transaction had just taken place. Now, of course, after he shared that with my friend, nothing more was ever heard about it. So out of sight, out of mind. And then when I got the text yesterday from my husband, everything just sort of came full circle. And I could just see how the dots had all been lined up all along. It just needed to be on the Lord's timeline. Anyway, so that was pretty exciting, and I just wanted to share the first thing that went through my head when I heard this news, that it was public and it actually happened, was that this is a part of the restoration. When you think about something being restored, you think about something being returned to its rightful owner in its rightful condition, something being restored to how it once was. And knowing that these properties and items have been restored to the Lord's church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's this feeling of near completion, right? Something that we've all been waiting for so long. And now that it's happening, it causes you to put your eye on other locations, properties, and items that other people and churches own, and it causes you to wonder how soon those might be restored back to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
The Lord said, I will hasten my work in its time, and He makes good on His promises. If you think the church has been fully restored, you're just seeing the beginning. Wait till next year, and then the next year. Eat your vitamin pills, get your rest. It's going to be exciting.
Okay, so I have parked. So now that the camera is still, I'm just going to finish up my thoughts. Anyways, I remember right away my mind went to Temple Lot. Now, Temple Lot is owned by the Church of Christ, not to be confused with the Community of Christ, who just sold us all of these properties. The Church of Christ has dwindled down quite a bit to a very small amount of members. According to the Church of Christ on their website, when they talk about the history of their church, they don't speak very positively about the prophet Joseph Smith, which was very surprising to me. They don't believe that there is a need for a prophet on the earth, and so they didn't feel that he should have been a prophet. So they don't seem to reverence him in that way, and they don't seem to speak very fondly of him. And the way that they speak about our church, all of the saints that went west with the succeeding prophet, President Brigham Young, they speak of our church as having started a new church and being the church that broke off from the original church. So they view their church as the original church, and everyone else is a breakoff. They go on to talk about how the members who went out west to Utah were rebaptized, and they felt that that was wrong. But a very important detail that they leave out of this story on their website is how that practice of rebaptism was a very common practice, even from the time of Joseph Smith. When he was prophet on the earth, this was a common practice. So I have included 2 links down below to 2 articles that talk all about this. And now, as to the history of the community of Christ, whom we purchased all of these properties from, this is on their website. Here is their view or version of what happened after the prophet Joseph died. So this is titled Succession Crisis. Following the death of Joseph Smith Jr., the church was left without a clear leader. Over the next 16 years, our movement fractured into numerous factions under various leaders. Some were focused on the earliest restoration doctrines, others looked to Kirtland or Nauvoo for guidance, while yet others created post-Nauvoo innovations. It goes on to talk about the many members who fell away and were scattered across the Midwest without a leader or an organized church. So they refer to their church in its early years as a movement, and they talk about how after the prophet died, there was no clear leader, so everyone was sort of left to fend for themselves. So the common pattern here with all of these breakoff groups, with these other churches, is they all talk about how after the prophet died, there was no clear leader and no one knew what to do, so they formed their own groups, their own churches. Now here's the difference with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There was no question about it. There was clear direction. It was very clear that the Lord was directing his church. When this experience happened, where everyone witnessed the mantle fall upon the prophet Joseph's successor. This first written account is from William Adams, age 22. He wrote, "There was a great multitude attending the meeting. More than one half the crowd could not find seats and stood on their feet. Never were so many at one meeting that I ever saw. I was sitting down and could not see the speakers on the stand. I was listening very attentively so that I could hear every word. I heard a voice speaking. I was surprised, and jumping to my feet, expecting Joseph the prophet was speaking, having heard him often in public and private, so that I was quite acquainted with his voice. This was a strong testimony that the 12 apostles were the rightful leaders of the church, and that the mouth of Joseph had fallen on Brigham Young." This next account is from William Moore Allred, age 24. He wrote, "Sidney Rigdon, one of Joseph's counselors, had moved to Pittsburgh, and when he heard of Joseph's death, he came to Nauvoo claiming his right to lead the church. At least, he said, the church was 14 years old and had the right to choose a guardian. But Brigham Young, the president of the 12 apostles, and others of the 12 that had been on a mission, just got home as the meeting was called for Rigdon to preach. And after he got through, Brigham got up and spoke with such power that it convinced nearly all that were present that the mantle of Joseph had fallen on him. I was perfectly satisfied." And then this account from Benjamin Ashby, age 15. He said, "I was in the congregation when the question of the succession to the leadership of the church was before the people, and I solemnly assert and testify that the last time I saw the features, the gestures, and heard the sound of the voice of Joseph Smith was when the form, voice, and countenance of Brigham Young was transfigured before the congregation, so that he appeared like Joseph Smith in every particular. Thus the Lord showed the people that the mantle of Joseph had been bestowed upon Brigham Young. And then this account from Lewis Barney, age 35. He said, President Young then arose and took the stand, his face and countenance having the appearance of Joseph. His voice and words were the familiar voice and words of our martyred prophet. So much so, the whole congregation was fully satisfied that the mantle of the prophet Joseph had fallen on him, and some of the saints really believed it was in reality the prophet himself. Well do I remember the feelings that possessed my breast at the time I knew it was Brigham Young, and being familiar with the countenance, voice, and manner of speech of the prophet Joseph Smith, I knew the mantle of the prophet had fallen on Brigham, and it was marvelous and a miracle wrought by the power of God in the sight and hearing of the whole multitude, that they might never doubt that Brigham was the chosen leader of the church. These are just a few of the many hundreds of accounts of the same testimony and experience. I will have a link down below if you want to check that out. And recently on my other YouTube channel, The Happy House, I did a chapter reading from my great-great-great-grandmother's biography, and she also talked about this experience because she was there. And the way she describes it is absolutely incredible. She sealed her testimony as well that she knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that the mantle of prophet had fallen on Brigham Young. The accounts of the fellow apostles are just as incredible. It seems that those who did not attend that meeting and didn't witness this experience, as well as those who had a great dislike for Brigham Young, they disregarded this experience and stayed behind. They did not want to join the saints on their journey west. No, it doesn't look like the Wikipedia has updated things since the church made this announcement about their transaction. It does have this to say, however, about the Church of Christ and the property that they own known as Temple Lot. It says, the Temple Lot is currently owned by the Small Church of Christ, which acquired the land in 1867. Currently, this body has its headquarters on the site, which has twice been damaged by arson attacks. The Temple Lot Church has insisted since about 1976 that it will not cooperate with other Latter-day Saint or Christian denominations in building a temple, nor will it sell the lot, regardless of any price that might conceivably be offered. Some members of other Latter-day Saint groups have described the Temple Lot Church as, quote, squatters on the location, but that the organization steadfastly defends its right to possess the property as its physical and spiritual custodian. I remember visiting the Temple Lot when I visited Independence, Missouri, about 5 or 6 years ago. And I remember learning about all of this, all the different churches in that area, which churches owned which properties, the history and the timeline of all of these breakoffs of all these different churches, eventually all of these breakoff groups. So the bottom line is the church that broke off from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, when all of the saints came out west to Utah, most of the members who stayed behind ended up forming a different church, which they believed was the true church. They believed that everyone who came to Utah was no longer a part of that true church. And those who stayed behind because they believed that that authority, that prophetic mantle fell on the family of Joseph Smith. And over time, that group split off into other groups, which continued over the decades, all the way up until today, where you have over 400 different breakoffs. And I remember when I was staying with this family in Missouri, I was there on a Sunday and I was thinking they were going to invite me to their church. And I remember they said, you know what? You don't want to go to our church. You will be so bored out of your mind. We only have about 6 or 7 members that make up our little split off. And one of them is a little child, and some of them aren't even members. So you're better off going to a Latter-day Saint ward. This is what they told me, and I thought that was interesting because anytime we have guests stay with us who are not a member of our faith, we always extend that invitation. Would you like to come to church with us? Or would you like to hear more about the restored gospel? So where this family was pushing me away and saying, trust me, you don't want to come. It's nothing exciting. It's nothing that great. You would be bored out of your mind. You wouldn't enjoy it. You're better off going to your own church. So that's what I did. And I remember noticing this night and day difference. Attending that ward and being around fellow Latter-day Saints, you could just feel the light. You could feel the truth. You could feel that authority, that power. The Holy Ghost was so strong. Versus being around all of these other people throughout the week who belonged to all of these splinter groups, as kind and friendly as they were, there was definitely something different. You could see it and you could feel it. They sort of blended in with mainstream Christianity. There was no keeping of the word of wisdom. And I just remember going to these meetings and feeling anything but the Spirit. All I can say is that it was anything but reverent. It was noisy and chaotic and confusing, sort of this feeling of anything goes. And you could just see how that had trickled down into all of these split off groups where they all marched to the beat of their own drum. And if somebody didn't like something, all they had to do was break off and start a new group and take people with them who were on the same page as they were. And I remember this family telling me about that. They said, you know, it's so sad. We used to belong to the Community of Christ, formerly known as the RLDS Church, and it was such a strong church. There were so many members. But then over the years, as their leaders began to vote on different policies and change things, such as women having the priesthood and marrying LGBTQ couples, all of these things that were not originally a part of their church, that people were changing to align more with the ways of the world, to be politically correct. This was upsetting a lot of the traditional members, and so they would leave and form new churches. So that is why that area is so saturated with so many different groups and churches who all believe in the Book of Mormon. It's the strangest thing, because here in Utah, if you believe in the Book of Mormon, you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But over there in Missouri, that's not the case. So it was very different. But anyways, I remember when this couple shared with me that the Community of Christ had possession of all of these lands and properties, but that they were wanting to sell them to our church because they were running out of money. They were in financial ruins. Their numbers were just continually dwindling. And I remember in that moment thinking, that is so telling right there of the fruits of the true church, because you look at this break-off church and how it's broken off into so many other churches and how they are all drying up. There's no authority, no order, anything goes. It's confusing, it's chaotic. Their members are dwindling. Everything's just sort of drying up. And then you look at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, headquartered in Salt Lake City, Utah, and you see how our church is continually growing. It is spread all over the earth. We have temples that dot the earth. You can see how the kingdom of God is prospering. And this is why we were able to purchase all of that land and those properties. You can just see the fruits of the true Church of Jesus Christ. So what came through my mind is this is a church of restoration. Things are being restored. The restoration continues to happen. These sacred buildings and properties have been restored to the Lord's church. Anyways, it's exciting to see this restoration continue to take place and unfold right before us. So this was super exciting, and it just makes you wonder what else is next, right? Now, some other things I wanted to share real quick that I accidentally left out of the last video message was a couple Sundays ago during one of our lessons, we had a visitor sitting in our class, and she shared with us something interesting that was new to me. I'll put a screenshot up right here. She said, look at this new visual of the plan of salvation in the Preach My Gospel manual. Here it is. You see these 4 circles above Christ. And she pointed out how this is just another way that the Lord is making changes to help teach the gospel and his plan for happiness in the most simple way possible. We've seen these changes recently take place over the past couple of years within the temple, and now we're also seeing them in our study guides and manuals. So I absolutely love this. She said this is so beautifully depicted. It's such a simple way to teach the plan of salvation. Another witness of the hastening of the work with all of these incredible changes. Something else that I thought was interesting was this year, I was invited to be a part of 3 different women's choirs. And I found that interesting. All of the choirs where I live for all of our upcoming conferences, even our Easter Sunday, all of these choirs are women only. And because there are 3 of them, I see that as a pattern. So our ward is doing a women's only choir with an invitation to all the women in the ward to come sing during sacrament meeting on Easter Sunday. And then we have a stake women's conference coming up in a couple of months. And of course, the choir for that is all women. But then also for our stake conference, they are putting together a choir of only women in the stake. So that has really stood out to me. Again, it reminds me of what we've been told by prophets of our church, that the women of the last days will play a significant role in the gathering of Israel before the Lord's return. And to me, it just feels like this is sort of a witness of that. We have incredible men in our ward and in our stake who are very talented when it comes to singing. So it's interesting to me that we have all of these women's choirs for women only. There seems to be a lot of symbolism in that. I received this message this week and just wanted to share in this video. It says, "Hi Lindsay, I just have had some thoughts about the past and upcoming solar eclipses over the last few months, and I thought I'd share them with you if that's okay. The eclipse that happened last October was also called a Ring of Fire eclipse. It made me think of childbirth and the crowning or ring of fire that happens just before the baby is born. I delivered 5 of my 6 children without an epidural, and the ring of fire is very real and very painful. With my 5th baby, I was actually fearful of going into labor because I didn't want to feel the pain again, but refused to get an epidural again after what happened with the one I did have. It was rough. But with my youngest baby, I knew that I should not be afraid, as the fear was likely not going to help anything. I approached labor much more prayerfully. It was amazing to me how much of a difference it made. It's silly that I'm ever surprised at how Heavenly Father and Christ always are there for me to ease my burdens. But they always are there and always help me when I approach them. Anyway, back to the Ring of Fire. After the October eclipse, I looked up Ring of Fire and childbirth and read this, quote, "As you'd expect, the Ring of Fire can be very uncomfortable, depending on whether you're using pain control medication and how effective it is. Some women respond to the pain by trying to stop pushing or by not pushing as hard. But you'll need to try your best to push through any pain and deliver your baby," unquote. Something that I found interesting is that in my personal experience, I find the most relief when I push with all I have through the contractions. It acts like its own relief to the pain. I've just thought about how this might apply to what is yet to come as we continue towards the Savior's second coming. If we stop pushing, stop working, stop trying, will the pain of what's happening be so much worse? If we cast aside the fear and faithfully follow Christ and push through and keep working, will the pain be eased or even disappear? And my response was, "Oh, I love this. I wasn't aware of that term relating to childbirth. Reminds me of the word corona in relation to solar eclipses and how that means crown. The baby crowns. Wow, I love your analogy in relation to your own experience. And look at what time you sent it. She sent it at exactly 11:44 a.m. There's that pay attention number that represents the gathering of Israel, 144. And I don't know about you guys, but I have noticed over these last few weeks, there has been a lot of adversity happening all around us, especially within our own family regarding illness. For the past few years, we have been very blessed to not experience illness in our home. It's very rare that someone in our family gets sick, and if they do, it's just for a couple hours. It's nothing major, something very mild. But I haven't experienced anything for the past few years. And that all changed a few weeks ago when illness after illness after illness continued to hit our family and hit our home. And it seems as though right when someone recovered from something, 2 days later they came down with something else. And we're convinced that one of our children had 2 different illnesses at the same time. And these aren't just your 24 or 48-hour viruses. No, these had our children in bed for days upon days. We've had 2 children miss a full week of school. And at one point, my husband and I both had something, and I was knocked out for 3 days in my bed. It was that bad. And it was pretty painful. My body was so achy, I couldn't even sit up. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't even talk. It just took too much energy. It was too exhausting to talk. And that's how it's been for our children. And so I've noticed that. I've noticed that it's been stronger with the girls. So my husband, he had the same thing I did, but it seemed that he didn't have it as long and he handled it much better. And then my youngest got a little bit of something, but the symptoms were very mild and he completely was able to handle it. My oldest son hasn't got anything. He's been perfectly fine. And then me and my 2 girls, we got it the worst. So it's really bizarre. I don't know what to make of that other than it seems like these illnesses as of lately have really stepped it up quite a bit, and it feels like we're dealing with something totally different. These really do feel like the plagues of the last days. And if anything, I told my family, well, maybe this is to strengthen our immune systems and prepare us for what's right around the corner. I know that other friends and family members have been through quite a bit this week as well. They've had quite a bit of contention and several trips to the emergency room, and so it's clear that the enemy is on the attack. It's clear that things are really starting to escalate, and we're also seeing that with politics and so many other areas. Here is a screenshot I forgot to include in the last video message. It says 3 new moons spotted in our solar system. There was that number 3 again. So let me remind you of what I shared in the last video message regarding signs in the heavens and the number 3. Right as I mentioned eyes to see, and then I said that leads us into today's video message. Right about that point, when this image popped up on the screen that I was about to talk about, if you look down in the bottom corner, there's that pay attention number 144, which represents the gathering of Israel. There it was, pay attention. This was a rare image of an exploding supernova, and I talked about how it looked like an eye, and then I showed this image that shows the 3 balls of light that make a triangle around the eye in the center of the number 8, or in other words, an infinity sign, which represents eternity. Anyways, I talked about in that video about these signs and symbols that represent eternity, the all-seeing eye or all-searching eye, which is the eye of God, as well as covenants and heaven and earth coming together, which represents the millennium. And also what takes place in the temple. The temple is a place on earth where heaven and earth come together. Everything happening right now seems to be pointing us to covenants, the covenant path, heaven and earth coming together, the importance of the gathering of Israel right now on the earth at this time. And with the purchase of these properties, it really does seem that the Lord is hastening the restoration. He's hastening this work and restoring all things at a quicker pace than before. Another screenshot I forgot to include in the last video message was on the Weather Channel and talked all about how we will see an increase in hurricanes this hurricane season, that it most likely will be a very historic hurricane season because of La Nina. And speaking of threes, I came across this news article, Rise of the Triple-demic. It talks about how this year there are 3 viruses competing to infect your body: the flu, COVID, and RSV. There are many news articles that have reported on this story, and they all say that this is the reason why you might feel sicker longer with this season's viruses. It's not the viruses themselves or the different strains, it's the fact that you're battling them back to back and most likely even at the same time. Now, this goes along with my thoughts and feelings exactly about what's been happening in our family. It's been reported that battling these 3 illnesses back to back or even at the same time will cause a person to be in bed for a couple of weeks and to cause them to feel as though their healing and recovery has been delayed. And this pattern people have noticed of starting to feel better finally, and then 2 days later, they're out again, laying in bed with the same symptoms. This is because they're catching the next virus, and they're now having to deal with that and battle that after having just battled a previous virus. And over the past couple of days, I continue to see the number 144, a constant reminder of the importance of the gathering of Israel and the role that each of us play in that event. And finally, this screenshot that I forgot to include in the last 2 video messages, I finally remembered this time around. This was a news announcement from the church which really got my attention. And of course, it's old news now, but I still wanted to share. It talks all about how the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has been helping the country of Iraq. It talks all about this nursing and midwifery program that they have implemented that has allowed as many as 7,000 nurses and midwives a year to be instructed in a variety of courses. And they opened a brand new building, 36,000 square feet, in January. So this is all pretty new. And it was so exciting to see what the church is doing to serve the people of the Middle East, because that's a part of the world we seldom get to hear about. It's a part of the world that we seldom get to step into. So for them to allow our church to serve them in this way, in this capacity, is huge. It's definitely going to plant some seeds and possibly open up some doors in the near future. And the last thing I wanted to share real quick was my husband and I went to our annual vision appointment at the beginning of last month. And it was funny because my husband's vision had slightly become worse, but my vision had improved. In fact, the doctor told me, he said, you pretty much have 20/20 vision. And I just turned 43 yesterday. Usually when you hit your 40s, your vision starts to change. You have a hard time seeing things up close, and you need reading glasses, which has been the case with my husband. But my vision actually improved. It was bizarre. And I said to the doctor, I said, actually, I did notice that. I've noticed that my eyes used to be pretty dry. The last couple of years I've come in for my appointments, my eyes have felt dry. And unless I put a bunch of eye drops in them, I can't see very clearly. Well, this time there were no eye drops, and I was told I pretty much have 20/20 vision. he said, yeah, your vision has actually become better. So improved vision. And that stood out to me. It really stood out to me because ever since 2020, I did a lot of videos talking about the Lord's perfect vision and how we need to align our vision with His. And so to me, there was a lot of symbolism in that. And I've really been feeling lately that this year, I need to really spend the next couple of months really focusing on tuning in more to the Lord and personal scripture study, being taught by the Spirit, aligning myself more with the Lord's will. And so I've had these thoughts and feelings coming up quite a bit lately. And when I heard the doctor say, you pretty much have perfect vision, your vision has improved, I felt that seemed very symbolic to me of this year, 2024. This is the year where we need to have our vision aligned with the Lord. And things really started with all of this back in 2020. That was the craziest year, but everyone could clearly see that the Lord was doing something. Things were being shaken up. People's goals and priorities were being realigned. And over the last few years, we've seen people go one way or the other. They've either come back to the church stronger than ever, or they've decided to leave the covenant path. So we've seen that happening. And it feels like this is the year, 2024, where the blessings of choosing the covenant path and aligning your vision with the Lord and His perfect vision, those blessings will come into play this year. It seems that it will all come full circle. Everything that's happened since 2020 up until this year. So lately in my videos, I've been talking a lot about having eyes to see and ears to hear. And so I feel like that's all a part of having that 2020 vision. When your vision is aligned with the Lord's vision, you have eyes to see. You see things the way that He sees them. You have that perfect 2020 vision. 2024 is the year when you want your vision aligned with the Lord's. It's a year where we really need to have eyes to see. The jets are flying over. My husband and I were actually talking about this yesterday with all of the bantering back and forth going on in the media with the elections yesterday. We were saying, you know, so many crazy things have been happening as of lately, and it's almost to the point where when you turn on the news and you hear the next crazy headline, you're sort of just like, You're just immune to it. We've just become so used to all the craziness. So in a world where there is so much craziness going on, so much bantering back and forth, it is crucial that we have eyes to see. So anyways, that's what's been on my mind lately. I just had a minute in my car, wanted to share those thoughts with you. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. If you have anything you want to share with me, anything you want to add to that, feel free to comment down below. I hope you're having an awesome day. I hope you have an awesome week, and I will see you next time.